In June 2019, at a skating rink called Mariwa Sports Land in Nagoya, one man quietly went about his daily routine. He checked tickets at the entrance, handed out rental skates, and spent some evenings working the front desk for overnight guests. 3 days a week, that was his life. That man's name was Ryuichi Kihara. At the time, he wasn't just another employee. He was already a two-time Olympic figure skater. Yet few people could have imagined that 7 years later, he would stand on top of the world with a gold medal around his neck, becoming part of the first Japanese pair team to achieve such a historic feat. But in the summer of 2019, none of that seemed possible. In fact, Ryuichi Kihara was preparing to walk away from skating forever. This is the story of how the miracle known as Riku Ryu was born. It is the story of two athletes whose paths crossed at exactly the right moment, connected by a thread so fragile that one small change could have erased everything. If one door had closed a second earlier, if one voice had called out a moment later, this story might never have existed. Behind the gold medal that amazed the world in February 2026 lies a summer day in Nagoya that changed everything. At that time, Kihara had already dedicated most of his life to skating. After competing as a singles skater, he transitioned into pair skating in 2013. He represented Japan at 2 Olympic Games with different partners, but the journey had been filled with disappointment and physical pain. At the Pyeongchang Olympics, his pair failed to advance to the free skate. His shoulder injuries had become severe, and only months earlier he had suffered a concussion during training. His previous partnership had ended, and no new partner was waiting. No partner. A body pushed to its limits. A future filled with uncertainty. While many of his friends had already begun building careers outside sports, Kihara had spent his entire life on the ice. For the first time, he found himself questioning whether continuing was the right choice. Those doubts often surfaced during conversations with Hirokazu Ioka, a colleague who worked alongside him at the rink. Ioka remembers Kihara as one of the most sincere people he had ever met. His duties were simple. He greeted customers, handled ticket admissions, rented skates, and occasionally worked overnight shifts at the facility's lodging center. Even though he was an Olympian, he earned the exact same hourly wage as every other part-time employee. Yet Kihara never complained. He treated everyone with respect. When young children visited the rink, he would kneel down to meet them at eye level before speaking. He never acted like a famous athlete. To him, every person deserved kindness. Years later, Ioka still remembers those moments vividly. The reason Kihara started working there was deeply personal. Watching people his age establish careers made him realize how little he knew about life outside skating. His part-time job wasn't simply about earning money. It was part of his attempt to understand what life after competition might look like. In many ways, it was the first step toward retirement. Yet even during that uncertain period, his love for skating never completely disappeared. After finishing work, he would sometimes spend time helping children training at the rink. He would lift them during practice, allowing them to experience pair skating elements they had only dreamed about. Looking back now, those children can say they were lifted by a future Olympic champion. Of course, none of them knew it at the time. Then came the day that changed everything. In June 2019, Kihara was invited to a skating federation trial held at Chukyo University. The event was designed to identify potential new pair skating and ice dance partnerships. Kihara wasn't there as a competitor. He had simply been asked to assist inexperienced skaters and help demonstrate pair elements. No one expected anything extraordinary. As the event was ending, Kihara removed his skates and headed toward the exit. His mind seemed to be drifting further away from competitive skating. Being a baseball fan, he even joked that he might try out for an independent baseball league. Whether it was a joke or not, there was truth hidden inside those words. The path of continuing as a figure skater was fading from view. At the same time, another important conversation was taking place inside the rink. Riku Miura was attending a training camp with her junior pair partner. Their partnership had reached a breaking point and serious discussions were underway. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone involved understood that the partnership was nearing its end. Meanwhile, Kihara was already walking away. One foot crossed the threshold of the automatic doors, and then it happened. Out of nowhere, legendary coach Bruno Marcotte shouted across the rink, "Ryuichi, put your skates back on." That single sentence changed the course of Japanese figure skating history. Had those words never been spoken, Riku Ryu might never have existed. The gold medal in Milan might never have happened. Kihara stopped. He turned around. He put his skates back on. Then he returned to the ice and met Riku Miura. Nothing had been decided yet. They were not partners. It was merely a trial. But the moment they stepped onto the ice together, something extraordinary happened. Kihara lifted Miura into the air for a twist lift. Everyone watching was stunned. Officials standing ringside immediately noticed the height, speed, and effortless connection between them. One Federation representative later admitted that the instant he saw the lift, he believed they had found something special. Even Kihara himself was shocked. Years later, he recalled the feeling, saying he instantly sensed a potential he had never experienced before. After years of pair skating with different partners, this felt different. Something clicked. Something neither athlete could fully explain. For Miura, the timing was equally significant. She was only 17 years old and facing tremendous uncertainty. Her previous partnership was ending, and there was no guarantee another opportunity would appear. The thought of continuing her skating career alone, far from home and facing an unknown future, was frightening. Yet after experiencing that first trial session, Miura reached a conclusion. She knew who she wanted as her partner. It was Miura who approached Kihara. Years later, Kihara would reveal something remarkable during his retirement press conference. He admitted that if Miura had not reached out to him, he likely would have retired. Without her invitation, there would have been no comeback. Without that comeback, there would have been no Olympic medals, no world championships, no Riku Ryu, only a story that ended quietly in 2019. Instead, Kihara accepted her offer. The retirement plans disappeared. The man who had nearly walked away from skating decided to stay. Looking back, it almost sounds unbelievable. A skater places one foot through an exit door, hears his name called, turns around, and suddenly the future of an entire sport changes. That is how fragile destiny can be. If Coach Marcotte had shouted 1 second later, if Miura had hesitated before making her offer, if Kihara had taken his baseball idea seriously, the story we celebrate today might never have happened. Yet somehow, every piece fell perfectly into place. In August 2019, Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara officially formed their partnership. He was 26 years old. She was 17. 9 years separated them. He was a veteran who had spent years searching for success. She was a young athlete who had devoted herself entirely to pair skating from an early age. On paper, it seemed like an unlikely combination. In reality, it became one of the greatest partnerships Japanese figure skating had ever seen. Kihara later admitted that he felt there could be no other partner for him. Miura described meeting him as a miracle, and perhaps that word captures the story perfectly. Because when you look deeper, this isn't simply a story about medals. It is a story about character. Remember the Olympian who worked part-time jobs, greeted customers with respect, knelt down to talk to children, and never considered himself above anyone else. Those qualities did not disappear when he became a champion. They became the foundation of the partner, leader, and teammate who would one day support Miura through every challenge on their journey to the top. Even in the darkest chapter of his career, Ryuichi Kihara chose humility over bitterness, kindness over frustration, and perseverance over surrender. And perhaps that is why destiny rewarded him. Because sometimes the greatest victories begin not with a gold medal, but with a simple decision to put your skates back on one more time. Pair skating is unlike any other discipline in figure skating. The male skater must lift his partner high into the air, launch her upward, and then safely guide her back to the ice. It demands extraordinary upper body strength, perfect timing, and absolute trust. Early in Ryuichi Kihara's career, those skills did not come easily. During his partnership with Narumi Takahashi, questions often surrounded the height and stability of his lifts. But Kihara refused to quit. Day after day, he pushed himself through grueling workouts, building the strength his sport demanded. Little by little, the skater once jokingly called too weak for pairs, transformed himself into one of the strongest pair skaters in the world. Years later, he would become the athlete capable of launching Riku Miura higher, and more beautifully than almost anyone else on the international stage. That transformation was not a gift. It was the result of countless unseen hours of effort, sacrifice, and determination. To fully understand Kihara's journey, it is important to remember the role Narumi Takahashi played in it. Takahashi was already a pioneer in Japanese pair skating, having won a World Championship bronze medal alongside Canadian partner Marvin Tran in 2012. However, Olympic eligibility issues eventually forced that partnership to end. With the Sochi Olympics approaching, Takahashi needed a new partner quickly, and Kihara stepped forward. The partnership was formed under immense pressure, barely a year before the Games. Years later, Takahashi reflected on Kihara with admiration. She described him as perhaps the most naturally suited athlete for pair skating she had ever seen. Beyond physical ability, she recognized qualities that mattered even more: consideration for a partner, reliability, patience, and a willingness to put the team first. Those traits would eventually become the foundation of everything he achieved. Still, after their partnership ended, both athletes moved in different directions. Life presented different challenges, and Kihara entered a period filled with uncertainty. Those difficult years eventually led him to the part-time job he was working in 2019, a chapter that almost marked the end of his competitive career. Yet there was another person whose influence cannot be overlooked. His name was Hiroshi Kobayashi. Without him, the story of Riku Ryu may never have happened. For years, Japanese pair skating struggled with a severe lack of athletes. Some national championships featured only a single pair team, while others barely had enough participants to hold meaningful competition. Despite the introduction of the Olympic team event, Japan lacked the depth necessary to compete consistently at the highest level. Rather than accepting that reality, Kobayashi decided to change it. He launched talent identification programs and pair skating trials designed to discover future partnerships. He also recognized Kihara's potential long before many others did. While Kihara was still competing in singles, Kobayashi noticed that he possessed the physical build, skating skills, and mindset needed for pair skating success. That early belief proved critical. Without Kobayashi's invitation, Kihara would never have attended the trial in 2019. He would never have stood near that automatic door preparing to leave. He would never have heard Bruno Marcotte shout for him to put his skates back on. In many ways, Kobayashi wrote the first chapter of the Riku Ryu story. On the other side of that story stood another influential figure. For Riku Miura, that person was coach Kumiko Wakamatsu. When Miura was still a young skater, Wakamatsu introduced her to the excitement and beauty of pair skating. The lifts, throws, twists, and unique connection between two athletes fascinated her. While most teenagers focused on singles competition, Miura made the bold decision to dedicate herself entirely to pairs at just 14 years old. It was a decision that would shape the rest of her life. Years later, when reflecting on Miura's retirement, Wakamatsu spoke warmly about the challenges her student had overcome. Every setback, every disappointment, every difficult moment had strengthened her. The coach knew better than anyone how much resilience existed behind Miura's bright smile. As Kihara had Kobayashi guiding his path, Miura had Wakamatsu encouraging hers. Both skaters were supported by people who believed in them long before the world did. That is why their gold medal belongs not only to them, but also to every mentor, coach, and supporter who helped them reach that moment. In August 2019, Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara officially became partners. Many observers immediately focused on their age difference. Kihara was 26, Miura was 17. The gap seemed unusual even by pair skating standards, but Bruno Marcotte saw something others overlooked. For him, the most important ingredient in a successful pair was not age, height, or experience. It was the quality of the relationship between the two athletes. A strong, positive, and supportive partnership creates progress. Without that foundation, talent alone is never enough. Marcotte believed these two skaters could build that kind of relationship. History proved him right. As their careers developed, the nickname Riku Ryu began spreading among fans and media. Combining Riku from Miura's name and Ryu from Kihara's, the nickname symbolized something larger than either individual athlete. It represented unity. Single skating is ultimately an individual pursuit. Pair skating is different. Success depends on becoming one synchronized force moving across the ice together. Kihara once explained it perfectly. We are a team that builds everything together. We can only succeed if we become one. That simple statement captured the essence of Riku Ryu. They were never just two skaters sharing the same rink. They became a single competitive identity. However, the early months were far from easy. Although Kihara brought years of pair skating experience, learning to skate with a completely new partner required patience. Miura faced even greater challenges. She had recently ended her previous partnership and suddenly found herself beginning a new chapter alongside someone 9 years older, in a completely different environment. The pressure was overwhelming. In interviews years later, Miura admitted there were moments when she felt emotionally exhausted only 3 months into the partnership. Everything felt uncertain. She had to adjust to a new teammate, new expectations, and life in a foreign country. For a 17-year-old athlete, the burden was enormous. Then something happened that changed everything. At a critical moment, Kihara had a conversation with Miura. The exact words remained private between them, but their impact was undeniable. Whatever he said helped restore her confidence and renew her determination. Kihara was not simply acting as an experienced skater. He was supporting her as a person. That moment became one of the foundations of their partnership. Years later, Miura reflected on their relationship by saying that meeting Ryuichi Kihara helped her grow not only as an athlete but also as a human being. Looking back, it is possible that the real Riku Ryu story began there, not with medals, records, or championships, but with two people learning how to trust one another during difficult times. Soon afterward, they relocated to Oakville, Canada, where they began training full-time under Bruno Marcotte. Oakville was not a glamorous skating capital. It was a quiet town of roughly 200,000 residents. There were no large Japanese communities and no constant spotlight from the media. What it did offer was something more important: world-class coaching, a great training environment, and the opportunity to focus completely on improvement. Far from home, with few familiar faces around them, Miura and Kihara built a new life together centered entirely on skating. A 26-year-old athlete considering retirement and a 17-year-old skater chasing an uncertain dream had traveled across the world in pursuit of the same goal. Their competitive debut came at the 2019 East Japan Championships. The partnership was still young. There were rough edges and areas needing improvement. Yet something special was already visible. Even then, they moved across the ice with remarkable harmony. Their timing matched naturally. Their speed matched naturally. Their instincts matched naturally. Kihara later explained that one of the first things he noticed was how effortlessly their skating aligned. Without speaking, they moved in the same direction. Without discussing it, they accelerated at the same moment. It felt different from any partnership he had experienced before. There was an undeniable chemistry. Marcotte saw it as well. From the beginning, he believed their potential was extraordinary. That belief soon began turning into results. By the 2021 World Championships, only 2 seasons after forming their partnership, Miura and Kihara achieved the highest placement ever earned by a Japanese pair team at the time, finishing 10th and securing an Olympic spot for Japan. The achievement was more than a ranking. It was proof. For the first time, Kihara no longer spoke about the gap separating them from the world's best teams. Instead, he spoke about dreams becoming realistic. The man who once stood at an exit door wondering whether to quit was now discussing the possibility of reaching the top. The transformation was remarkable. Then came Beijing 2022. Miura and Kihara finished 7th in the individual event, the best Olympic result ever achieved by a Japanese pair team. They also helped Japan capture a historic silver medal in the team competition. The momentum continued. In 2023, they conquered the sport. They won the World Championships. They captured the Four Continents Championship. They claimed the Grand Prix final. With those victories, they completed a historic Grand Slam, becoming the first Japanese pair team ever to dominate the sport at such a level. Only 4 years earlier, the partnership had been born from uncertainty, heartbreak, and a last-minute call across a rink. Now they stood on top of the skating world. And it all started because one man chose to put his skates back on. Coach Bruno Marcotte once described their rise with a single word: extraordinary. To him, becoming world champions in only their third competitive season together was something almost impossible to explain. Yet behind that extraordinary achievement was a story far more powerful than medals and records. It was the story of a man checking tickets at a skating rink in Nagoya, and a teenage girl struggling with the heartbreak of a partnership that had fallen apart. When you understand where Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara came from, the phrase, world champions, begins to carry an entirely different meaning. After completing the Grand Slam in 2023, Kihara reflected on the journey that brought him there. "It took me 10 years to get here." Those words carried enormous weight. His decade-long journey began in 2013 when he transitioned from singles skating to pairs. It continued through difficult partnerships, Olympic disappointments, injuries, uncertainty, and the summer of 2019 when he was seriously considering retirement while working part-time at a skating rink. Then came Riku Miura, and everything changed. 10 years of Kihara's struggle met 7 years of Miura's dedication, and at that intersection, the miracle known as Riku Ryu was born. Yet even after reaching the top of the skating world, neither athlete allowed success to make them comfortable. Most champions spend time celebrating their achievements. Riku Ryu immediately started thinking about the next challenge. Kihara openly admitted that winning the world championships was already something they considered part of the past. Rather than feeling secure, they felt a sense of urgency. He believed that if they continued doing the same things, they would eventually fall behind. Instead, they wanted to keep evolving, keep learning, and keep pushing themselves beyond their limits. That mindset revealed something important. The same attitude that prevented Kihara from giving up in 2019 was the same attitude that eventually turned him into a gold medalist. No matter how high they climbed, they never became satisfied. Not because they were fearful, because they genuinely wanted to become better. Then came the moment that would define their legacy forever. February 2026, the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics. After finishing only 5th in the short program and enduring a painful night filled with tears and disappointment, many athletes would have struggled to recover. Riku Ryu did the opposite. When the free skate began, they delivered the performance of their lives. Every lift was higher, every throw was cleaner. Every movement carried emotion. By the end of the night, they had earned a world record free skate score of 158.13 points and a total score of 231.2, securing Japan's first-ever Olympic gold medal in pair skating. History had been made. Across the globe, major media outlets rushed to tell their story. Broadcasters, newspapers, and sports analysts celebrated one of the most remarkable achievements ever seen in Japanese figure skating. But whenever I think about that gold medal, my mind doesn't immediately return to Milan. Instead, I think about Nagoya in 2019. I think about the man checking tickets at a skating rink. I think about the 17-year-old skater whose previous partnership had reached a dead end. I think about the automatic door Kihara was preparing to walk through. Because if any of those moments had unfolded differently, none of what followed would have existed. What if Bruno Marcotte had never called out his name? What if Miura had hesitated before approaching him? What if Kihara had truly decided to leave skating behind? The more you think about those possibilities, the more unbelievable the Riku Ryu story becomes. Years later, Kihara said something that perfectly captured its meaning. "If it hadn't been Riku, I don't think I would have continued." Miura said something equally powerful. "Meeting Ryuichi was a miracle." The fact that both athletes described their partnership using the exact same word tells you everything you need to know. Miracle, not because fate handed them success, but because countless small moments aligned perfectly. A chance meeting, a split-second decision, years of relentless work. Together, they created an Olympic champion. Their story reminds us of how important human connections can be. Sometimes one conversation changes everything. Sometimes one opportunity arrives when we least expect it. Sometimes one person enters our lives at exactly the moment we need them most. On April 28, 2026, roughly 2 months after winning Olympic gold, Miura and Kihara officially announced their retirement from competitive skating. During the retirement press conference, Kihara turned toward Miura and quietly said something simple: "Thank you for reaching out to me in 2019. As he spoke, Miura smiled. It was a beautiful moment. The man who once stood on the edge of retirement had become an Olympic champion and was now thanking the partner who helped save his career. Honestly, it is difficult to imagine a more perfect ending. The Riku Ryu story did not end because they retired. It simply completed its circle. It began at a rink in Nagoya in 2019. It reached the summit of the sport in Milan. And it concluded with gratitude between two people who changed each other's lives. Perhaps that is why their story resonates so deeply. Many people have experienced moments when they were ready to quit, moments when they felt lost, moments when they stood at their own version of that automatic door, unsure whether to keep going. Riku Ryu reminds us that sometimes the decision made in a single second can transform an entire future. During their retirement press conference, many fans noticed something familiar. Whenever Kihara became emotional, Miura was there beside him. Whenever Miura struggled, Kihara found the words she needed. For 7 years, that pattern never changed. When one was strong, the other needed support. When one was hurting, the other provided comfort. Their partnership extended far beyond skating. It became a genuine bond between two people who helped each other grow. Miura later reflected that meeting Kihara helped her mature not only as an athlete but also as a person. That growth became visible throughout their journey, from a nervous teenager facing uncertainty to an Olympic champion standing atop the world. After retirement, they announced plans to launch their own ice show project, determined to explore new possibilities within figure skating. They were stepping away from competition, but they were not leaving the ice. For many fans, that news brought enormous relief, because Riku Ryu had become more than athletes. They had become a source of inspiration. Yet when I think about their story, the image that stays with me most is not an Olympic podium, a world championship, or even a retirement ceremony. It is a quiet moment from the summer of 2019. A worried skater wondering whether he had a future. A part-time worker showing kindness to children at a skating rink. A man uncertain about tomorrow. 7 years later, that same man would lift his partner higher than anyone else in the world and stand atop the Olympic podium with a gold medal around his neck. There is something profoundly beautiful about that journey, because Riku Ryu teaches us that life rarely follows a straight path. The answer often arrives from an unexpected direction. The opportunity that changes everything may appear when we are closest to giving up. Two people with different ages, different backgrounds, and different experiences can somehow find the same rhythm and move toward the same dream. That is not only a story about figure skating. It is a story about life itself. Everyone has a moment like that automatic door. A moment when they almost walk away. A moment when someone calls their name. A moment when one decision changes everything. Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara showed the world what can happen when we choose to keep going. When they completed their free skate in Milan and Kihara embraced Miura with tears streaming down his face, it was not simply the emotion of winning a gold medal. It was 7 years of sacrifice, struggle, trust, and perseverance finally overflowing all at once. As cameras around the world captured the scene, Miura gently rubbed his back, just as she always had. And in that moment, the story that began in Nagoya reached its perfect conclusion. So if you are facing uncertainty today, remember this. A man who was preparing to retire became an Olympic champion because a 17-year-old girl found the courage to ask one simple question. If that can happen, perhaps it is still too early to give up on your own dream. The competitive career of Riku Ryu may be over, but the lessons they left behind will continue inspiring people long after the medals, records, and headlines have faded away.